emphasizing their desire for peace and cooperation. As the council continued, voices from both sides began to find common ground. Folk farmers spoke of the benefits they had seen from the new irrigation system built by the Tuatha De Danann. Others praised the new medicinal herbs they had brought. Bridget stood to speak, her voice clear and strong. Not so different, you and I. We were both once newcomers to this land. Both seek to provide for our families and ensure a future for our children. By working together, we can achieve so much more than by standing. Her words struck a chord, and a tentative agreement was reached. Things would continue as they were, but grievances would be discussed in the open, not in hushed whispers. The council concluded with a renewed sense of hope and determination to overcome the obstacles ahead. The weeks that followed the Grand Council were marked by significant progress in the cooperation between the Tuatha De Danann and the Firbolg. Lugh and his companions were preparing to make the long journey back to the main Tuatha De Danann camp, where they would inform their leader Nuada that they could settle the lands without fear of conflict. Saddlebags were being mounted on the horses as the sun rose over the rolling green hills. Curiously, a Firbolg warrior walked up to them, froze, and then ran away. King Eochaid, he cried, rushing to the leader's tent. Thieves! The Tuatha De Danann have raided our supplies. King Eochaid's face darkened with anger and confusion. He immediately summoned Lugh and the Tuatha De Danann leaders to his hall. The atmosphere was charged with tension as the Firbolg warriors surrounded the newcomers, their expressions hard and unyielding. Lugh stepped forward, his face a mask of calm despite the accusations. King Eochaid, we have done no such thing. This must be a misunderstanding. We would never break the peace we have worked so hard to establish. Eochaid's eyes narrowed as he threw a saddlebag on the floor. Out of the saddlebag spilled precious coins and fine trinkets. How do you explain this, Lugh? These goods bear our mark. Lugh took a deep breath, his mind racing. He recognized the mark. There was no doubt that the goods in their bags did not belong to them. He did not have time to consider when or how those goods had made it into his saddlebag before the stifling gazes of 100 angry Firbolg warriors forced him to reply. This is a deliberate act of sabotage, he said firmly. Our people are not thieves, and you are surely not foolish enough to believe this. Bress stepped forward, his voice dripping with false concern. As certain as the sun will rise in the east, the Tuatha De Danann will steal again. And next time, it will be our lands which they steal, for the whole Tuatha De Danann army is just 4 days' march from here. The hall erupted in murmurs. What was mere seconds ago was anger about theft was now fear. The Firbolg warriors looked to King Eochaid for direction. Eochaid raised his hand for silence, his gaze fixed on Lugh. Very well, Lugh, Eochaid said, his tone icy. You claim innocence, and I am inclined to believe you. I will investigate this. Until then, our alliance is suspended, and your people will be confined to your camp. Any attempt to leave will be seen as an act of aggression. Lugh nodded solemnly. Thank you, King Eochaid. Bress's followers, however, were numerous and loyal. A tense standoff ensued as they challenged their leader's decision. "We will not let you side with these invaders," they shouted. "Eochaid, you are blind to the threat they pose." In an instant, King Eochaid realized the situation had escalated beyond peaceful resolution. The hands of some of his subjects began to caress the hilts of their sheathed swords, and the once indomitable king realized that his own life was at risk if he were to go against the growing mob. His eyes scanned the room once more, looking for supporters, but it seemed as if the twisted words of Bress had spread an insurmountable fear across the room. "Tuatha De Danann, there is space for only one of our peoples on this sacred isle. Now, leave with haste. I guarantee your safe passage out of my village and nothing more," he declared, his voice heavy with sorrow. The Tuatha De Danann and the Firbolg began preparations for war. The atmosphere grew grim as both sides readied themselves for the impending conflict. The dream of a peaceful coexistence shattered not by the ambition of their leaders, but by the distrust of their subjects. The days leading up to the battle were filled with intense preparation. The Tuatha De Danann and the Firbolg, both formidable peoples, readied themselves for the coming conflict with a mix of determination and dread. In the Tuatha De Danann camp, the atmosphere was tense but resolute. Nuada, their leader, called a council of war to discuss their strategy. Seated around a large table, the leaders of the Tuatha De Danann examined maps and discussed their options. "We must use the terrain to our advantage," Luke said, pointing to a narrow pass in the hills. "If we position our forces here, we can control their movements and strike from higher ground." Nuada nodded in agreement. "The Firbolg are strong and disciplined, but we have the advantage of agility and magic. We must use every resource at our disposal." Dian Checht, the healer, added, "I will ensure our healers are ready. The battle will be fierce, and we must be prepared to tend to the wounded swiftly." As the council continued, the Tuatha De Danann leaders made plans for every possible scenario. Their determination to protect their people and their new home was palpable. Meanwhile, in the Firbolg camp, preparations were equally intense. King Eochaid, though saddened by the turn of events, was resolute in his duty to defend his people. In many ways, King Eochaid blamed himself for the unraveling of the relationship. His people may have staged a theft to sabotage the alliance, but he believed that their concerns were genuine, and he had failed to address them. Whilst he was the king, Bress and many other Firbolg warriors had fought hard to earn them what territory they possessed. "We will meet them at the pass of Balgatan," Eochaid declared. "It is a defensible position, and we can use our strength in numbers to overwhelm them." Shreng, the fierce Firbolg champion, stepped forward. "I will lead the vanguard. Let me face Nuada in single combat. It will weaken their morale if their leader falls." Eochaid considered this for a moment before nodding. "Very well, Shreng. But be cautious. The Tuatha De Danann are skilled warriors, and we must not underestimate them." The Firbolg strategists discussed their formations and battle tactics, ensuring that every warrior knew their role. The sound of weapons being sharpened and armor being readied filled the air. As the day of battle approached, both camps were a hive of activity. The Tuatha De Danann warriors trained tirelessly, honing their skills and preparing their minds for the conflict ahead. The Furbolg, too, drilled their soldiers, ensuring they were ready to fight for their homeland. On the eve of the battle, Nuada stood before his assembled warriors. The setting sun cast a golden glow over the hills, and the air was filled with a sense of solemn determination. "We face a great challenge," Nuada said, his voice carrying over the gathered crowd. "But we do so together, as one people. We have voyaged for months through many storms to reach here, suffered countless tragedies, buried many loved ones. We have earned our right to these lands." The warriors raised their weapons in salute, their voices a thunderous roar of agreement. As the sun set, casting long shadows over the landscape, the Tuatha De Danann prepared for what would come. In the Firbolg camp, King Eochaid addressed his own warriors. "Tomorrow, we fight to protect our home and our way of life. The Tuatha De Danann are strong, but we are stronger. We fight for our ancestors, our families, and our future. Stand firm and fight with all your might." The Firbolg warriors echoed their king's sentiments, their voices filled with resolve. As night fell, both camps settled into a restless sleep, knowing that the dawn would bring a battle that would determine the fate of their peoples. The morning of the battle dawned clear and bright, the sky a brilliant blue that belied the storm of conflict about to unfold. The Tuatha De Danann, led by Nuada and Lugh, took their positions at the pass of Balgatan. The air was tense, filled with the anticipation of the coming clash. From their vantage point, they could see the Firbolg army approaching, a disciplined force moving with purpose. The ground seemed to tremble beneath the weight of their march, and the sound of their war drums echoed like thunder. Nuada, standing at the forefront, raised his sword high. "Hold your ground," he commanded. The Firbolg, led by their fierce champion Sreng and their king Eochaid, advanced with determination. Sreng, a formidable warrior who towered over his kinfolk, was eager to prove his prowess in battle. As he approached, he spotted Nuada, the leader of the Tuatha De Danann, and issued a challenge for single combat. Nuada stepped forward to meet Sreng. The two warriors faced each other, their eyes locked in a battle of wills even before their weapons clashed. The air was thick with tension as the armies watched, waiting to see the outcome of this crucial duel. Without a word, the duel began. Sreng lunged forward with incredible speed, his axe swinging in a deadly arc. Nuada parried with his sword, the clash of metal ringing out across the battlefield. The two warriors moved with a deadly grace, each strike and counterstrike executed with precision and power. As their duel raged on, the armies behind them surged forward. The Tuatha De Danann, led by Lugh and Bridget, moved swiftly to take advantage of the terrain. Lugh directed archers to higher ground, where they could rain arrows down on the advancing Firbolg. The Firbolg, under King Eochaid's command, pressed forward, trying to advance towards the archers. Eochaid's voice could be heard above the din of battle, rallying his warriors and urging them to hold their lines. The Firbolg's strength and unity were formidable, and they pushed back against the Tuatha De Danann with relentless force. Amidst the chaos, Nuada and Sreng continued their duel. Sreng's strength was matched by Nuada's skill, and neither warrior seemed able to gain the upper hand. Their fight became a focal point on the battlefield. Those closest to them did not battle one another, but instead watched in awe as their champions dueled. Nearby, Lu found himself engaged in combat with a group of Firbolg warriors. His spear, the Spear of Victory, moved with blinding speed, striking down enemies with each thrust. But despite their efforts, the Tuatha De Danann found themselves pushed back by the sheer force of the Firbolg's assault. The narrow pass became a choke point, and the fighting grew even more intense as both sides struggled for control. As the battle raged on, a cry went up from the Firbolg ranks. Sreng had managed to land a heavy blow on Nuada, sending the Tuatha De Danann leader sprawling to the ground. The sight of their fallen leader sent a ripple of shock through the Tuatha De Danann ranks. Nuada looked at his arm in shock. The glorious armor which protected it was mangled, and an intense pain shot through him. Before he could grasp the extent of his injuries, he rose to his feet, his other hand grasping his sword awkwardly. He took an unsteady step forward and hurled his sword. Sreng swung his mighty axe, sending the gilded sword tumbling into the muddy ground. But before he was able to swing it again, Nuada leaped at him, a small, sharp dagger in his injured hand, as his other hand wrestled over the axe handle. Nuada demanded his surrender. "Yield, Sreng. This battle has cost us both dearly. Let us end it now." Sreng, finding a dagger near his throat, met Nuada's gaze. After a tense moment, he realized Nuada had the upper hand. He nodded and lowered himself to his knees. "I yield." Nuada of the Tuatha De Danann. Sreng's surrender sent a shockwave through the Firbolg ranks. The sight of their champion kneeling before Nuada, conceding defeat, caused the warriors to falter. The Tuatha De Danann, seeing the opportunity to make terms, also ceased their attack. The battlefield fell silent. Nuada, breathing heavily and clutching his injured arm, extended a hand to help Sreng to his feet. There was a moment of mutual respect between the two warriors, forged in the heat of their duel. As they looked around, they noticed the fallen figure of King Eochaid among the Firbolg. The realization that their leader had been slain ended any chances of the battle continuing. The Tuatha De Danann, despite their victory, felt the somberness of the moment. Loch and Bridget joined Nuada, their faces reflecting the mix of relief and sorrow that hung over the battlefield. "We have won," Luke said, "but at a great cost." Nuada addressed Sreng. "This battle has cost us both dearly. Let us end this conflict and find a way to coexist." Sreng, though defeated, met Nuada's gaze with a fierce resolve. "What do you propose?" "The Tuatha De Danann will offer your people 1/4 of Ireland," Nuada replied. "You may choose your land. Let us live in peace and honor the memory of those who have fallen." Shreng considered the offer, his eyes scanning the faces of his weary warriors. After a moment, he nodded. We accept. We will take Connaught and live there in peace. With the terms agreed upon, both sides began the arduous task of tending to the wounded and honoring their dead. The battlefield, once a place of violence and death, became a site of mourning and reflection. Over the next few days, the Tuatha De Danann and the Fir Bolg saw less and less of one another as they moved to their new territories. Despite the victory, Nuada faced a personal challenge. Having lost his arm in the battle, he was no longer eligible for kingship according to Tuatha De tradition, which required the king to be physically perfect. With a heavy heart, Nuada stepped down, and Brez, a half-Fomorian prince renowned for his beauty and intellect, was chosen to replace him as king. But like Brez of the Fir Bolg, Brez of the Tuatha De Danann would also bring trouble to his people.
upgrade to Vivid Storm integrated laser TV cap.
Didn't actively request it yourself, you couldn't have missed the buzz around the James Webb Space Telescope. It is more powerful than any other space telescope, including Hubble. So big, it had to be folded up like origami to fit onto the rocket that carried it into space. So precise and sensitive, it has to be kept at temperatures not much warmer than absolute zero to prevent its own internal heat radiation from getting in the way of its sensors. So expensive, it cost $10 billion to make, and so complicated, it took decades to complete. 300 potential failure points stood between it and proper functionality. But now it is here. And it has an incredible mission: to study planetary systems for evidence of life, to understand the formation of planets, stars, and galaxies, and to peer out across the universe to objects so far away. The light they gave off has been traveling for almost as long as the universe is believed to have existed. In other words, the James Webb Space Telescope was built to spot the first stars and galaxies at the very
understanding is based on current cosmological models developed through observations and theoretical physics. According to the Standard Model of Cosmology, the universe began with an event known as the Big Bang, which marked the beginning of space, time, matter, and energy as we understand them. Contrary to the common misconception, the Big Bang was not an explosion that occurred at a specific location in space, but rather the simultaneous emergence and expansion of space itself from an initial state of extremely high density and temperature.
This is Google Pixel 9a with Gemini.
Space itself from an initial state of extremely high density and temperature. As a result, the universe does not have a center from which everything expands outward. Instead, every region of space is part of the expansion process. This concept is often explained using analogies, such as imagining the surface of a balloon being inflated, where all points on the surface move away from each other uniformly, without a central point on the surface itself. In the case of the actual universe, the analogy extends to 3 dimensions, with space expanding uniformly in all directions, regardless of location. Observational evidence supporting this includes the detection of the cosmic microwave background radiation, which is the afterglow of the early universe, and the observed redshift of light from distant galaxies. The redshift indicates that galaxies are moving away from us, and the farther they are, the faster they recede, which is consistent with the uniform expansion of space. Importantly, this expansion does not imply that the universe is expanding into a pre-existing space. Space itself is stretching, and all distances between large-scale structures, such as galaxies and galaxy clusters, are increasing over time. On smaller scales, such as within galaxies or solar systems, gravitational forces counteract the expansion, keeping these systems bound together. The absence of a central point in the universe means that no specific location holds a privileged or fixed position within the cosmos. All observers, regardless of their location, would perceive the universe expanding away from them in all directions. This uniformity is a consequence of the cosmological principle, which states that the universe is homogeneous and isotropic when viewed on sufficiently large scales. Homogeneity means the universe has a consistent composition and structure throughout, while isotropy means it looks the same in all directions. Together, these properties imply that there is no unique center to the universe's expansion. The rate of expansion is described by the Hubble constant, a measure of how quickly the distance between objects in space increases over time. Recent observations indicate that the expansion of the universe is accelerating, driven by a phenomenon known as dark energy. The nature of dark energy is not fully understood, but it is believed to permeate space and contribute to the observed increase in the rate of expansion. Despite ongoing research, the ultimate fate of the universe remains uncertain. Possible scenarios include continued expansion indefinitely, eventual stabilization, or a contraction phase known as the Big Crunch, though current evidence favors continued acceleration. The concept of a centerless yet expanding universe challenges intuitive understandings of space and motion. In everyday experiences, expansion typically involves growth from a central location into surrounding areas. However, the universe operates on principles governed by general relativity and quantum mechanics, which describe the behavior of space, time, and matter beyond human-scale experiences. Recognizing that the universe expands everywhere without a center provides insight into its structure and evolution. It highlights the limitations of interpreting cosmological phenomena using conventional spatial concepts and emphasizes the role of mathematical models and empirical observations in developing accurate descriptions of the cosmos. Scientists continue to study the universe's expansion through advanced telescopes, satellite missions, and theoretical research. These efforts aim to refine measurements of the Hubble constant, understand dark energy, and explore the universe's origins and large-scale behavior. While significant progress has been made, many aspects of the universe's expansion and structure remain topics of investigation. The absence of a center and the uniform expansion observed throughout space reflect the complex dynamic nature of the universe as described by modern. There are no solid objects. Everything is mostly empty space. There are no solid objects, and everything is mostly empty space. This conclusion is based on scientific understanding of the structure of matter at the atomic and subatomic levels. What appears to be solid in everyday life is the result of interactions between particles that are themselves composed mostly of empty space. Atoms, which make up all matter, consist of a dense nucleus surrounded by electrons. The nucleus contains protons and neutrons, while electrons occupy regions of space known as orbitals. The scale of these components is such that the vast majority of an atom's volume is empty space. For example, if the nucleus of an atom were the size of a small marble, the electrons would orbit at distances comparable to several meters, leaving the space between them mostly empty. Despite this, objects in the physical world appear solid and impenetrable due to the electromagnetic forces that govern the interactions between atoms and molecules. These forces prevent objects from passing through each other by creating resistance at the microscopic level. The sensation of solidity arises from the repulsion between negatively charged electron clouds when atoms are brought close together. Although the matter itself is primarily empty space, these interactions produce the experience of solid surfaces. Scientific instruments capable of probing matter at extremely small scales, such as scanning tunneling microscopes, confirm that atomic structures contain vast regions without physical substance. Even within the nucleus, subatomic particles like protons and neutrons are composed of smaller particles called quarks, bound together by gluons, yet these structures also include significant amounts of empty space relative to their overall size. The concept that everything is mostly empty, space extends to larger structures, including planets, stars, and galaxies. On cosmic scales, objects such as celestial bodies are separated by vast distances, with empty space dominating the universe's structure. This pattern of empty space existing between and within objects persists across multiple scales of observation. In practical terms, however, the forces between particles create the illusion of solidity and mass. For example, when you sit on a chair, the atoms in your body interact with the atoms in the chair, generating electromagnetic repulsion that supports your weight and prevents you from falling through. These interactions occur at a level that is imperceptible to human senses, but are sufficient to maintain the appearance and function of solid objects. The understanding that matter is mostly empty space has been confirmed by experimental and theoretical advancements in physics, including quantum mechanics and particle physics. Quantum field theory describes particles not as discrete solid objects, but as excitations of underlying fields, further emphasizing the abstract nature of what is perceived as solid. While this knowledge challenges intuitive perceptions of reality, it aligns with experimental data and mathematical models that accurately describe the behavior of matter. The absence of true solidity in the universe does not affect the consistency or reliability of physical interactions at the human scale. Instead, it highlights the difference between macroscopic experiences and microscopic reality. Recognizing that everything is mostly empty space provides insight into phenomena such as nuclear reactions, quantum tunneling, and the behavior of materials at extremely small scales. It also informs technologies like electron microscopy, nanotechnology, and quantum computing, which rely on manipulating matter at levels where the structure of empty space becomes significant. Although matter is primarily empty space, the properties of materials, including strength, density, and appearance, emerge from the arrangements and interactions of atoms and molecules within that space. The combination of atomic structure and fundamental forces creates the macroscopic world experienced daily, even though its foundation consists largely of emptiness. Scientific research continues to investigate the nature of matter, space, and the fundamental forces that give rise to observable reality. Current understanding supports the conclusion that solidity is an emergent property resulting from interactions within structures that are overwhelmingly composed of empty space. Despite this, everyday experiences remain consistent, as the forces at work maintain the stability and functionality of what is perceived as solid objects. You'll never truly know if anyone else is conscious. The question of whether anyone else is conscious is one of the most fundamental and unresolved issues in philosophy and science. Consciousness refers to the subjective experience of awareness, perception, thought, and feeling. Each person is directly aware of their own conscious experience, but there is no objective method to access or verify the conscious experience of others. This situation is sometimes referred to as the problem of other minds. It is based on the understanding that while human beings can observe the behavior, expressions, and communications of others, these observations do not provide definitive evidence of subjective awareness. For example, when another person speaks, smiles, or reacts to situations, it is possible to infer that they possess conscious experiences similar to one's own. However, such inferences rely on assumptions and cannot be independently verified. The inability to confirm the consciousness of others extends beyond human beings to include animals, artificial intelligence, and hypothetical life forms. Even with advanced technologies such as brain imaging, neurological studies, or behavioral analysis, scientists cannot conclusively determine the presence or absence of conscious awareness in another entity. These methods can measure brain activity, detect patterns of thought, and observe external behavior, but they cannot access the inner subjective experience itself. The limitation arises from the distinction between observable phenomena and internal experience. Observable phenomena include measurable actions, speech, and physiological processes. Internal experience refers to personal, subjective awareness, which cannot be directly transmitted or demonstrated to others. This leads to the philosophical position known as solipsism, which holds that only one's own.
At Carl's Jr., late birds get the bag. After 8 p.m. for $5.99, get a Cali Classic single, fries plus chicken stars. Or spicy chicken sandwich, onion rings plus chicken stars. Or mix it up, just $5.99. Build your own bag only at Carl's Jr.
Only one's own mind is certain to exist. While most people reject solipsism in daily life and assume that others possess consciousness, this assumption is based on shared behavior patterns and social interaction rather than definitive proof. The scientific study of consciousness continues to investigate its nature, origins, and mechanisms. But the problem of other minds remains unresolved. Efforts to understand consciousness include examining neural correlates, exploring cognitive processes, and developing theoretical models. These approaches provide insights into how conscious states may arise, but they do not resolve the fundamental issue of verifying consciousness in others. Philosophers and scientists have proposed various theories to address the problem. Some theories suggest that consciousness is an emergent property of complex systems, implying that beings with sufficiently complex brains or cognitive structures are likely conscious. Others propose that consciousness exists on a spectrum, with varying degrees of awareness across different organisms or systems. Despite these theories, no empirical method can confirm subjective experience beyond one's own. The issue also applies to artificial intelligence and machines designed to mimic human behavior. Even if an artificial system can produce human-like responses, solve problems, or engage in conversation, there is no objective method to determine whether it possesses conscious awareness or simply simulates intelligent behavior. This distinction is sometimes discussed in the context of the Turing test, which measures a machine's ability to imitate human responses, but does not address the question of subjective experience. Similarly, the possibility of consciousness in animals remains a topic of scientific and philosophical inquiry. Many animals exhibit complex behaviors, learning capabilities, and social interactions that suggest awareness. However, without access to their subjective experiences, it is impossible to confirm the extent or nature of their consciousness. The same uncertainty applies to hypothetical life forms or unknown entities that may exist elsewhere in the universe. The absence of definitive knowledge about other minds does not prevent social interaction, cooperation, or empathy. Human societies function on the assumption that others possess consciousness and share similar experiences. This assumption facilitates communication, relationships, and collective understanding. Nevertheless, it remains an assumption rather than proven knowledge. The inability to know with certainty whether anyone else is conscious is a reminder of the inherent limitations of human perception and cognition. It reflects the boundaries between internal experience and external observation. These boundaries are unlikely to be overcome through current or foreseeable scientific methods. As a result, each person continues to navigate the world with the knowledge of their own conscious awareness, while acknowledging the impossibility of fully confirming the consciousness of others. Some people don't recognize their own reflection. Some people do not recognize their own reflection. This condition is known as mirror self-misidentification and is classified as a type of delusional misidentification syndrome. It is a rare neurological and psychological condition in which a person believes that their reflection in the mirror is another individual rather than themselves. The condition can occur as a result of brain injury, neurodegenerative diseases, or psychiatric disorders. It is most commonly observed in individuals with conditions such as dementia, including Alzheimer's disease, or in some cases following strokes or traumatic brain injuries that affect specific regions of the brain responsible for self-recognition and visual processing.